Welcome to the Charts podcast. Today we have Torben Emmerling. He's the founder and managing partner of Effective Advisory and Chief Behavioural Officer of Team Farner. He's in studio with us to take on the question, how do you influence more sustainable solutions? Torben works to transform scientific evidence and methodologies into effective strategies and measures for companies, public organizations, and policy actors to achieve positive behavior change. So all in all, very, very interesting. Welcome, Torben.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And great to have you. So I have some questions here for you, and I like to go through and look forward to the conversation. I'm just going to dig that right in and start with the first question. And I'd like to start with a statement. We are not in the business of manipulation. We are in the business of helping people to make the decision that they already wanted to make. Does this apply to energy efficiency?
Oh, you really jump right in. So thank you for this tough opening question.
You're welcome.
I think I can answer this in two ways. First of all, I think we're really not in the business of manipulation. I believe everybody who's in the business for behavioral change is in the business for good influence, and so are we. We're using insights and methodologies from behavioral science, decision science, and neuroscience to create solutions that somewhat connect to human behavior. And we've done some quite extensive research in Switzerland, but also in Europe, that showed us that people actually would like to do much more for energy efficiency, but they find it very hard to do things consistently, but simply also to start with doing things differently. And with the words of the famous Nobel Prize winner and well-known behavioral scientist Daniel Kahneman, is if we want to have people change their behavior, we need to make it as simple as possible. And what we've discovered in this research was that it wasn't easy for people to do things. Many people have actually stated that they would like to do more, but they don't know where to start. And if there would be just a simple website that would outline 5 or 6 tips for organizations to get started, or 5 or 6 different support schemes, being financial support or simply advisory support, technical support, that would make their life a lot easier. So over the last 4 to 5 years, we have focused a lot on bringing these insights into practice and to making it easier for people. So I would do agree, yes, they want to make it. I would agree a little less with manipulation. I would rather like to call it simplification or deliberate influence.
Yeah, thanks. It's a good answer to a tough question. And on
Thank you.
Yeah, and on making things simple and easy, that's the whole thing. And this is a very, very complicated subject for lay people and for us who are in the industry. So simple and easy is good. But how can behavioral science encourage people to think more about sustainable solutions?
Yeah, good follow-up question. I think we can help by thinking a little harder, so that the target audience needs to think a little less about it. So I like this framing because it shows that a lot of things are done on a deliberate and conscious level. So we're doing a lot of effort to tell people, give them information, create the right incentives, which is often done on a very conscious, very deliberate, very economically rational level. Yet we see, and we have a lot of proof from that from tons of studies, that people are following a system or a way of deciding that is often way less conscious, way less deliberate, and sometimes not in line with the norms of economic rationality. So we do help people a lot in making it more simple and follow their sort of gut feeling or their autopilot to get to more sustainable solutions. I can tell a little story about this because sustainability, especially electricity and energy sustainability, is something that is very striking if you look at it from a social science perspective. We know since exactly 200 years that there is a greenhouse effect. And we know since 1850, I think, that CO2 emissions sort of support that greenhouse effect on Earth. And we know since 1941 that human beings are one cause of the greenhouse effect on our wonderful planet we call Earth. And we've had the world's first climate conference in 1979, so almost 50 years ago. So we know all this since 200 years, and we still haven't managed to make that transition successfully and effectively. So there must be something that goes beyond the knowledge and beyond the information into something where we need to work with the autopilots of the people, or the regular habits and routines that we all applied and that we have adopted in our upbringing, and that sort of need to be challenged today, because we see how we live and how we interact, especially in the Western developed world, might not be the most sustainable way forward. So short answer, or short summary to your question, I think we need to help people think a little less, and with this little less, nudge them towards more sustainable solutions.
Very good. I like the way you put this. You know, we work harder to help. Well, we think harder so people can think less. That's a very interesting way to say it. And also what you just said about, you know, since the first conference on climate was 1979, it's a long time ago. So it does indeed goes beyond. It does indeed go beyond knowledge. It's about also these emotions that we want to, you know, bring forth to help people to make the decision. So very good. Thank you for the answer. But can you share some, maybe a follow-up question? Can you share some examples of a project that you have had with your audience, you know, in line with what we were just talking about? So concrete examples, if you have them.
Yes, of course. There are a number of very good examples. The big wins in behavioral science are those where a very small, subtle change leads to long-term effects. And for example, the OECD has done a very successful experiment in which they have gradually and very slowly lowered the temperature in their main offices in a speed so that people didn't realize that the temperature is lower, and we were able to adapt. Human beings don't like change if it's rapid, but we're very good and very adaptive to things that change slowly. So it was adapted very slowly, and as a result, they were able to save a whole lot of energy without people even noticing it. And because that change was gradual and implemented for a long time, these sort of rewards from the lower regular temperature in the rooms kept on paying out for a very, very long time. Everything that has to do in households, for example, with changing the default setup on heating times, changing the temperature in fridges, and anything that has to do with air conditioning or controlling temperatures to warmer or lower temperatures is super fertile territory for simple implementation, simple default changes that have long-term effects. So this is an area we look at. Another area we look at is helping people make more informed decisions about their electricity or energy consumption at large. And we do this by implementing simple, very simple, socially informed feedback devices, such as electricity bills that not only show you your consumption and your the money that you owe the electricity provider, but also how your electricity consumption has changed, how your electricity consumption has changed to your own behavioral patterns in the past, how your electricity consumption compares to your neighbors. And we have also not done this for, in private households, but we have recently tried this also in businesses for to our knowledge, the first time in the world at all. We have compared businesses and their electricity consumptions to other comparable organizations, showing them how they could potentially save. And by providing this information with the electricity bill, we supported a better knowledge, a better understanding, and also a more sort of impulsive reaction to electricity consumption and potentially the reduction of that electricity consumption.
Interesting. Thanks. A good answer. But maybe you touched on this before, but I want to ask anyway. Energy efficiency, you know, electricity, you know, those commodities. They are not. This is not a very appealing topic. It's not very close to people. They don't really care so much. But is there a way, to your mind, to make energy efficiency more appealing, more engaging, more sexy, even if I should dare to use that word here?
And that's a very tough question, because as you correctly said, electricity consumption and anyways, things that often have to do with sustainability are not very, very visible or experienceable. And it's often observed in an individual's behavior or household or sort of societal behavior, which doesn't, it's just not disclosed as easily as I don't know, if you drive a big car or you wear specific expensive clothes or something else that you can show to the public. Yet there are ways to use and leverage the intrinsic motivation a lot of people have, and even the extrinsic motivation that is created through a number of incentives, monetary incentives, but also social incentives around sustainability. We have seen that a number of colleagues and organizations that we work with started trialing specific labels, started trialing with specific social proofs that they care not only for their for themselves and their business and their profit, but also for the environment and the society that they are operating in. We have seen that organizations do care a lot, not just for the sort of marketing effect, but also for the talent attraction effect and a societal shift that we can observe at large. Luckily, a younger generation is much more conscious about how these organizations are operating, how profits are generated, and what sort of the environmental footprints are. So we see a whole lot of tendencies that go beyond just the simple marketing and buy our product. It's great to, hey, we are a conscious employer and we do care for this, and these incentives spill over to talents that these organizations are able to attract. Last but not least, I think to make energy efficiency more appealing and more sexy is also a way that allows us to live a life that it remains, sort of keeps the planet as is. What I'm saying with this is we have a whole lot of people that are happy to post on social media about great places they are, about things they do, and about maybe stuff they have acquired. Now, this is all just possible because this beautiful planet is working as it is. And we know this concept called loss aversion. Humans don't really like losing things. So one of the components that we like to show people is that this is a very, very fragile balance. And the appealing sexiness of the planet, to use the word you introduced this question with, is there today, and we actually risk losing this, and we need to do a lot more to keep this and to keep this level we have today. And with that, lead the question of how can we do to not just sort of be greater, but to keep that great level that we already earn today.
Interesting, fascinating, in fact. But on changing behavior, I mean, there's a lot of research on it, obviously, and your creature of habit. If you don't want to, we adapt over long term, but not in the short term, etc. On rewards, are they the magic formula for building habits and creating engaging gamification experiences?
That's another really good question, Fridrik. So maybe some listeners are knowledgeable and acquainted with the formulas on habit creation and habit sustainability put forward by James Clear or Charles Duhigg. So we have a trigger, we have some form of responsive behavior, and we have a reward. Now, I do think all of these ingredients are very, very important to form and sustain that habit. I don't think it's enough to just simply focus on rewards and start playing with different ways of rewarding people for such a behavior. We even have some proof from experiments that rewards are able to crowd out good triggers and good behaviors because they might incentivize or simply overrule the desirable behavior that people are intrinsically motivated to show. What we see on the flip side is that a lot of organizations think about, okay, this is what we want people to do, and this is how we reward them with. Oftentimes we forget that the trigger is the magical component that gets the whole thing started. From our perspective and using our model, we understand behavior as a sort of a cycle and an interaction of at least 4 components. In the most simplified version, we need attention. Our attention needs to be triggered by something. We need to process this information, and we need to make sense of it. And this can happen consciously and unconsciously, as I said before. We then need to form a decision, an intention, something that we want to put into practice. And many people have very good intention, but they fail to put it into the last step, which is action. Something that literally then turns their willingness, their intention to be more conscious on sustainability or consume things less or more mindfully into their actual behavior on a day-to-day basis. So this famous intention action gap is something we really care for. And then once we have this action, various organizations or interfaces forget to give people feedback about their action, which can lead which can actually be understood as a new trigger, because that again gets people's attention into this, start new processes, start new decisions, starts new actions. So this cycle keeps on going. And so for us, at least for the last 5-6 years, we've been working in the space of energy efficiency. There's a whole lot of potential to, yes, work with rewards, but there's at least the equal amount of potential to work at the very beginning of the cycle and help organizations better understand how good triggers can look like and how feedback can be used about existing behavior to help maintain or even ignite new sustainable behaviors in the future.
I guess this is more advanced than when I was studying psychology back in the days, and you used the Skinner's box with rats to understand.
Yes, Skinner.
So we moved beyond that. I can hear from your answers. So very, very good, thank you. But so more in line with this and how we get people to think and act differently. And just as you say, I mean, it's relatively easy. I don't think it's easy to get them to think a little bit differently, but to get them to act differently is a big thing. But which do you think is more influential, the power of incentives or the power of messaging? A black and white question for you here.
If I need to give one answer, I think it's incentives, because ultimately incentives are able to crowd out everything else. Mm-hmm. And it's important for me to stress that with incentives, I don't just mean financial incentives, I equally mean social incentives. So if you do things, but your society is punishing you for this behavior with social exclusion, then that's an equally good incentive for you to behave in the right way. Maybe even a bigger incentive than if you are fined or you need to pay extra money for that. So hands down, if you say, decide, Torben, if it's incentives or messaging, I would say in that black or white question, it's incentive. And then as a behavioral scientist, I would say it depends, and say messaging is equally powerful, and we can go into a rabbit hole on speaking about messages and who's the right messenger for information. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the fascinating part about social science. Also, the answer is always it depends. So it depends on a lot of things. So we are actually to our last question. So we talked about this conceptually, but we've also given some really good examples of how we can apply behavioral science. But for someone who's new to behavioral science, is there a solid framework that they can apply, not easily, or at least to understand it like more practically? Yes, there is. And I think the very first step is to be a good and curious observer of actual behavior that people are disclosing by simply doing the daily things they do. I personally find it very, very exciting and striking, for example, that everybody has adapted to taking their little key card out of this special socket in hotel rooms, lowering the lights and switching off everything that is on in the room when leaving the hotel. But we sort of failed to install this when we leave our own houses, because equally we could switch off all our lights with a default card or just the turn of a key when we leave the house, and we could have enough smart appliances that can stay on to heat the room or do our dishes or wash our clothes in the same time. So that's something I personally, as an observer, find brutally interesting to work with, and to sort of create new ideas and defaults around simple behaviors that people can perform, which have a big effect in the long run on their electricity or simply their whole energy consumption. For people who are then interested in going beyond, I would recommend two frameworks which are very, very similar. One is called BASIC, BASIC. It was developed by a good friend in Denmark called Pelle Hansen and his team, and published by the OECD for bringing behavioral science into public policy. The other framework I would propose is, as I said, very similar, a framework we've been developing with a number of leading scholars in behavioral science, and we've been using it for now 7 years, called DRIVE, It stands for define, research, identify, validate, and execute. And it's more or less a simple problem-solving steps relying on behavioral insights and methods to change consistently and verifiably change people's behavior. The framework is all about, first of all, understanding and defining what we want to achieve. So if you don't have an idea how the behavioral should change, it's probably a good investment to first of all understand your target audience better, and then to define what the good should look like. Famous words of Einstein have been, if you have 60 minutes to save the world, define your problem in 59 and then take 1 minute to solve it. Equally, a lot of initiatives fail because they don't have a proper definition of the goal and about the behavior that changes or that is observable as a result of that goal. The second step or research is that the call for understanding the context in which behavior takes place. Are people at home? Are people at work? Are people on the way to work? Are they commuting with a car and they might be able to commute with a bike or public transport instead? What is the context of people that we have in our target audience? And what is the behavior they show today? And why is this behavior different to the target behavior that we set out before? Once we have this gap between ideal and today's behavior, and we've understood the context, we can start experimenting with these interventions, or I for drive, which is identify solutions, creating solutions and ideas, literally for experimenting to close this gap between ideal and current behavior. We use a whole lot of nudges and behavioral interventions that have been published, but also that we have discovered to prove successful in business or public policy context. And then the V of drive stands for validate. An important component for everybody who's serious about behavioral science is to evaluate the impact of your initiative. So starting from the ideal and understanding the current behavior, we create an intervention or a change, and then we want to understand if that change is really making a difference. Because if not, we can save all that money and turn to something else that might make a much bigger difference. The validation is key. And unfortunately, various organizations are doing things without evaluating them enough. And then the last step of drive, E, is execution. Once we found the component that works, once we've evaluated and we've aggregated some data, and we have a good feeling that this thing we're proposing really works, of course, we want to disseminate it and execute it and just really talk about it on platforms like this here to help people understand that there is something that's really working and they might be able to apply in their context as well.
I think this is a really good chance to end on a high note, Torben. So it's been really informative, and thank you for your answers. I've learned a lot myself, and I just think it's fascinating to see how the behavioral science field fits under the umbrella of communications and branding and etc. So thanks a lot, and for joining us, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks for your tough, inspiring questions, and I very much enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Fridrik and team, and hope to see you and speak to you soon.
Absolutely, likewise.